This is my list of the top 8 Momir Basic cards of all time. Uses Magic Online, so there's not going to be an arena-only seeking cards here. First, let me give some honorable mention, and the first card is Hoverguard Sweepers, 6 blue for a 5/6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you may return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hand. And in Momir, returning creatures to hand is the same as destroying them because there are tokens, so they're going away forever. This used to be one of the top cards. It is still very good. It's just that has been some other cards that have become better. But I still want to give this card an honorable mention because this was the card you wanted to hit when you hit 8 mana in Momir, along with someone else. But it has been somewhat outclassed by other cards. It's still just an awesome card, but it's not more than an honorable mention these days. The honorable mention is Legion Loyalist, red mana for a 1/1 with haste, and it has Battalion. Whenever Legion Loyalist and at least 2 other creatures attack, creatures you control gain first strike and trample until end of turn and can't be blocked by creature tokens this turn. And every creature in Momir is a creature token, so if you can have this card plus 2 other creatures attack, your opponent just can't block. This is just an honorable mention because you usually don't hit 1-drops on Momir, and this card also doesn't do anything when you're behind. But if you have any 2 creatures, all your creatures are unblockable if you can get to attack. And you often hit this card when you want to activate some ability. You have 1 spare mana and 1 spare card in hand, and you just make a 1-drop because you got nothing else to do. Then this is probably the best card to hit on 1 mana. It just usually wins the game if you can attack because your opponent's creatures cannot block. Alright, let's get on to the list. At number 8 we have Cloudsteel Kirin. 2 and a white for a 3/2 flyer, and it says that equipped creature has flying and you can't lose the game and your opponent can't win the game. But how does it get equipped? Well, you reconfigure it for 5, so you put it on a creature you control. You can then also make it fall off if you want to. So if you can equip this to a creature, your opponent has a very short window to kill you, because for your opponent to kill you while you have this card attached to a creature, A, your opponent needs to kill the creature this is on, which is very hard in Momir, and B, your opponent also needs to put you to 0 or less life, because if your opponent can't kill you the same turn they kill the creature, you can just reconfigure it back the next turn. So your opponent needs to both be able to kill you and the creature, and that is very hard, so this usually just wins the game. Also, it can't be understated how good it is to give a creature flying in this format, because often you end up with some ground dork, a big 10/10 with no abilities, and then giving that flying gives you be able to kill your opponent even faster, which gives your opponent even a shorter window to kill you. So, fantastic card. At number 7 we have Savior of Ollenbach. 1 white for a 1/2 with training, which means that whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever this creature trains, exile up to 1 other target creature from the battlefield or a creature card from the graveyard. But the last ability doesn't matter. You're just going to take your opponent's best creatures. So for your opponent to stop this runaway train, your opponent needs 2 good blockers, because this becomes a 2/3 the first time. Then it just gets bigger and bigger. And also remember, as with Hoverguard Sweepers, when you're exiling a creature, it does not come back. So your opponent usually is just dead when you hit this card, because it takes the card that's going to kill you. And even if your opponent finds a removal later on, which is again very hard, the creature's not going to come back. So even then, you're still probably going to win because you got so much value from this card. And the way Momir works is that you usually just hit larger and larger power on your creatures. So this is going to be able to training again and again and again, because the way the Momir works is that you're getting higher CMC, that means higher power. So this card also is another trade-up that just wins the game when it comes to play. At number 6 we have a classic, Platinum Angel, 7 mana 4/4 flyer, and you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. So a little more fragile like Cloudsteel Kirin, because it is your opponent have artifact removal as well. That works on the Kirin too, but this one comes down a little later. But this doesn't require you to equip, you just play this and your opponent usually is dead. It's very hard to kill a creature in Momir, and this also is a flyer that closes out the game very fast. So this is one of the hardest cards to beat, and when you got this, your opponent can feel almost helpless, because what am I going to do? And also, there are some ways that you get decked in Momir. or your opponent's got some alternate win condition like Azors, Elocutors, there are some random cards, and this stops that as well. So this just stops your opponent from having to deck you and stuff like that. All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. Number 5 is Craterhoof Behemoth. 5 green, green, green for a 5/5 haste. And when it enters battlefield, creatures you control gain trample again +X until the end of turn where X is the number of creatures you control. So you just add up all the power of your creatures, and to that you add 5. And then you take all the creatures you have squared 2, and then you have how much damage it's gonna get. So this is just usually just 8 mana win the game. Often what happens is when you play this, is this lethal? Well, I don't know, but then you attack with everything and it's lethal. And even if your opponents can somehow survive, usually your opponent's board get completely wrecked and you're left with a lot of creatures and your opponent's got nothing left. So it usually just wins the game. It's the card you want to hit on 8 mana most of the time. But there are some scenarios where it's not going to win the game. Let's say you're very far behind on the board and it's not lethal. Well, then maybe there are better cards to hit. But usually it's just a game winner. And it's the card everyone talks about once they hit 8 mana. But there are actually better cards, which you're going to see, which is saying a lot because of how good Craterhoof Behemoth is. At number 4, we have Angel of Serenity, the card that has outclassed Overguard Sweepers. This is 4 white, white, white for a 5/6 flyers. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile up to 3 other target creatures from the battlefield and/or creature cards from graveyards. And when this leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hands. So this just kills 3 creatures permanently. It even is worded like the old school with Mesmeric Fiend, that if your opponent kills this in response, somehow like maybe with Wish Call or some like creature that you can sacrifice to kill a creature, the creature's not going to come back because it's worded the old school way. So this is just 7 mana 5/6. This may not win the game the exact same turn it comes down like Craterhoof, but it's gonna win the game in almost every same scenario as Craterhoof, because it just kills 3 creatures and you're left with a big flyer. You can often attack and kill your opponent in this turn or the next one. So it also helps you when you're behind. There's almost no scenario where you can play this and not lose. The only way is if your opponent's got some very good hexproof creature. But this is the best Shriekmaw in the format, I think. Okay, at number 3 we have Serra's Emissary from Modern Horizons 2. 4 white, white, white for a 7/7 flyer. As Serra's Emissary enters battlefield, you choose a card type. Spoiler, is going to be creature. You and creatures you control have protection from the chosen card type. So this means 3 awesome things. First of all, your opponents cannot deal you damage with the creatures. Second of all, all your creatures are unblockable. And third, the Serra's Emissary is invulnerable to creature removal. So if your opponent's got like a Wish Call or a Hoverguard Sweepers or Angel of Serenity, they can't touch Serra's Emissary or any of your other creatures for that matter. The only way your opponent gets out of Serra's Emissary is if they can deck you somehow, which is going to be super hard because they're also going to be on a short clock. Or if they can find some way to bounce all creatures like Kedrick Leviathan or Sunblast Angel. But if your opponent hits Sunblast Angel, this creature needs to be tapped as well. Sunblast Angel is a creature that destroys all tapped creatures, and it's a 6-drop, so it's kind of hard. So this card just wins the game 99.9% of the time. It's super hard for your opponent to interact with this card. Like you need like something that bounces creatures that doesn't target, like a Kedrick Leviathan. Alright, but how about the 7 mana card that wins the game on the spot? And that's Eternally Primal Conqueror. 5 red for a 7/7 Trampler. And when it enters the battlefield, you each play exiles card from the top of their library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled without paying their mana cost, and then it can transform to a toxic creature. But none of that matters. What matters here is that the cards are not put on the bottom. So if you hit this card, both you and your opponent's gonna exile the libraries, and then your opponent's gonna die during the draw step because your opponent's not gonna have a library. So it doesn't matter if it's a big creature or casting spells because that doesn't matter. This is just 7 mana win the game. The only way your opponent gets out of this is if they have a card like Obstinate Familiar, red mana 1/1. If you would draw a card, you may skip that draw instead. Or Chronotog, which is 1 and a blue for a 1/2, and you can skip your next turn and give it +3/+3. Then you're gonna lose. But in 99.9 again 98%, you're gonna cast Etali Primal Conqueror and you're gonna win the game. Yeah, you can't really ask for much more than 7 mana, immediately win the game. It's a very, very small set of cards your opponent can have to not die. But there is actually a card that is better than Etali Primal Conqueror, and that's number 1, Azorius Guildmage. White, blue hybrid, so this is a 2 mana card, and it's a 2/2, and you can pay 2 and a white to tap target creature. Useful, but not that good in Momir. But it has 2 and a blue counter target activated ability. And the Momir Avatar's ability is an activated ability. So if you hit this card on turn 2, you're going to leave up 3 mana for the rest of the game. As long as you have an island, which is probably the trickiest part. But then your opponent's never going to hit another creature for the rest of the game. And you can like, on turn 5, you can hold up 3 mana and pay 2, get a 2-drop. You're the only one who's going to hit creatures for the rest of the game. And if your opponent hits some very good card on 1, 2, or maybe 3 mana, if your opponent was on the play, you even have the tap ability to, like, if there is something that is randomly killing you. So this card just is 2 mana win the game, as long as you can have an island. And this is probably one of the few reasons you even want to play islands in Momir. So the reason I have this card higher than Etali is that it comes down earlier and wins the game. And with Etali, there is a small subset of cards that actually makes you lose the game, like the cards I was mentioning before. So these are my top 8 Momir cards of all time. Let me know in the comments if I missed something very good.